Welcome, and let your mind drift back, far back, to a time before the dawn of Olympus. Tonight, we will not witness the thunderous clash of titans, but instead listen to the quiet cosmic lullaby of a new world's beginning. This is the story of a hidden child and a patient hope. The slow, inevitable turning of fate's great wheel as one immense age gives way to the next. Let this tale of a universe finding its balance guide your breath and calm your mind. If this ancient echo brings you peace, a gentle like and subscribe helps this tranquil space find others seeking rest. Now settle in and let the story begin. Before the Olympians, before the silver light of the moon had a name, there was a long, golden, and heavy age. Let your mind drift there now, across a sea of forgotten time, to a world in its deepest, most profound infancy. The great Titans were the wardens of this young creation, and their king was Cronus, a being so immense and so powerful that he was not merely a ruler of time, but time itself. His reign was a vast, unending afternoon, a golden moment stretched into an eternity, and the whole of existence moved to the rhythm of his slow and steady breath. Imagine the earth in this era, a place of immense and primal power, a world still soft and new. The mountains were young, their peaks sharp and clean against a sky of the purest, deepest blue. They were not jagged or menacing, but stood as silent, thoughtful sentinels, their stony faces warmed by a sun that never seemed to burn too brightly, nor sink too low. The air around them was cool and clear, carrying the scent of clean rock and the faintest whisper of the high, empty heavens. Down in the valleys, the forests were deep and silent. The silence was not an absence of sound, but a presence. It was a silence full of the patient, imperceptible noise of life itself, the slow, strong push of roots through the rich, dark soil, the gentle, constant unfurling of ferns in the shaded undergrowth, the quiet breathing of a trillion leaves, drinking in the golden light. To walk in these woods was to walk through a great living cathedral, where the only hymn was the sound of your own quiet heartbeat. The rivers flowed with a slow and ancient purpose, their waters the color of liquid, amber in the endless afternoon sun. They moved not with the urgency of a world in a hurry, but with the calm, deliberate pace of a story being told, a story with no need to rush to its conclusion. They wound their way through meadows of the softest grass, their banks lined with flowers that were always in perfect, gentle bloom. The oceans, too, were calm. No great storms troubled their surfaces. No violent tempests churned their depths. They were vast, placid mirrors reflecting the serene sky, their tides a slow and sleepy exhalation, the deep and gentle pulse of the slumbering world. This was a world held in a perfect, unchanging stillness. The days were long and warm, stretching from one soft horizon to the next, without the sharp punctuation of dawn or the sorrowful finality of dusk. The harvests were endlessly bountiful. Fruit hung heavy and ripe on every bough, its skin unblemished, its flesh sweet and full. The fields of grain swayed in a gentle, hypnotic dance, their golden heads heavy and ready, with no season of frost or famine to ever threaten them. There was no need for haste, no cause for struggle, no whisper of ambition. For time itself, the very fabric of existence, was a slow and steady tide, not a rushing river. It was a great golden river of honey, and all of creation was suspended within its warm and heavy current. There was no past to long for and no future to fear, for the present was an eternal and beautiful gift, a single perfect note held for an age. Yet, even in this golden paradise, there was a quiet and unspoken, fear that lay at the very heart of creation. It was a subtle thing, a shadow that did not seem to be cast by anything at all. It was the echo of a prophecy, a whisper from Cronus's own ancient parents. Uranus, the great dome of the sky above, and Gaia, the deep foundational earth below. They had seen the turning of the great cosmic wheel, and they knew its one, unbreakable law. That which is, will not always be. The child will inevitably rise to take the place of the parent. They had told their son, the mighty Cronus, that his own strength would be his undoing, that a child born of his own blood, a new and vibrant life, would one day rise to supplant him, just as he had once risen against his own father to bring about this long, golden peace. This knowledge was not a shout, but a whisper that wound itself around the heart of Cronus. It became a permanent shadow in his soul, a quiet and constant sorrow that tinged the edges of his perfect world. He would look upon the flawless beauty of his kingdom, the serene mountains, the silent forests, the placid seas, and he would feel not just love, but a deep and possessive fear. He loved the stillness. He loved the unchanging perfection of the eternal afternoon. The prophecy, to him, was not a promise of new life, but a threat of an ending. The future was not a dawn, but a twilight that would surely fall upon his golden age. And so, his great love for the present began to curdle into a fear of the future. He began to see change not as growth, but as decay. He saw new life not as a gift, but as the seed of his own destruction. This knowledge, this shadow in his heart, grew deeper and darker with the birth of his first divine child. She was Hestia, and her spirit was the gentle, steady warmth of the eternal flame, a being of quiet and constant comfort. But in her light, Cronus saw not a daughter, but the first spark of a future he could not control. And so, in an act of profound and sorrowful desperation, he did the unthinkable. He did not wish to destroy her, but to preserve her, and to preserve himself and his perfect, unchanging world. He drew her back into himself, swallowing her light and her being into the vast, timeless stillness of his own. The world did not notice. The sun still shone with its warm golden light. The rivers still flowed with their slow and ancient purpose, but a potential, a gentle warmth that was meant to bless the world was now gone, held captive within the heart of its own father. Then came another child, Demeter, her essence the scent of rich soil and the promise of a harvest born of love and labor. And again, Cronus saw in her not the beauty of creation, but the threat of a new season, a new cycle that would break the spell of his endless summer. And he gathered her back into himself as well. He swallowed Hera, whose spirit was the vast and complex bond of kinship, and Hades, whose soul was the quiet, dignified mystery of the world below, and Poseidon, whose being was the deep, rhythmic pulse of the untamed sea. Each child was a new idea, a new future, a new song the universe was ready to sing. And each time, Cronus, in his great and terrible fear, would silence the music before it could begin, drawing them back into the silent prison of his own being. Its was a fear so deep, a love for the present so powerful, that to prevent the turning of fate's great wheel, he began to consume his own future. He swallowed his own divine children the moment they were born, preserving his golden age by holding it in a state of stagnant, fearful perfection. The world he ruled remained beautiful, but it was the beauty of a flawless, unmoving painting. It was a paradise without potential, a heaven without hope. The long afternoon continued. The golden light still bathed the silent mountains and the sleeping forests. But now, it was a world held together not just by power, but by a quiet, all-consuming and secret dread. It was a perfect cage, built by a loving and fearful king, waiting for a child that he could not find and a future that he could not stop. In the vast golden stillness of the age of Cronus, where time itself had been commanded to stand still, there was one heart in which a river still flowed. It was the heart of Rhea, the great mother of the gods, the queen of the silent and perfect world. While her husband, the mighty Cronus, sat lost in the heavy, sunlit trance of his own making, a deep and powerful current of sorrow and love moved through her. For a queen, she was profoundly helpless. She was a part of the beautiful, unchanging tapestry of the Golden Age, yet she was the one being who could feel the threads that were missing, the colors that had been forbidden to be woven. Each time a new divine life sparked within her, a light of immense potential, she would feel a joy as deep as the earth itself. And each time she would have to watch as that light was quietly and sorrowfully reclaimed by her fearful husband, drawn back into the endless stillness from which it came. Her grief was not a storm, it was a deep, quiet ocean, a constant and powerful presence that existed beneath the calm and placid surface of her world. And within this ocean of sorrow, a new feeling began to take root. It was not anger, not rebellion, but a quiet, unbreakable resolve, a maternal instinct as old and as powerful as creation itself. A whisper seemed to reach her, not from the sky above, but from the deep, knowing earth beneath her feet. It was the voice of Gaia, her own mother, the earth who remembered all things, and it was a whisper of hope. It spoke of a place hidden from the all-seeing gaze of the sky, an island sanctuary where the laws of Cronus were not so absolute, a place where a future might be allowed to grow. And so, as the seed of a new life began to quicken within her once more, Rhea made a silent and solemn vow. This child, this final, precious spark of hope, would not be lost to the shadows of the past. When her time came, she embarked on a secret journey. She moved like a whisper of mist, a shadow gliding over the sun-drenched land, her passage unnoticed by the king who saw only the unchanging present. She traveled to the island of Crete, a jewel of deep greens and soft greys, rising from a sea the color of lapis lazuli. The island itself felt different. The air was softer, the silence of the forests was deeper, and the mountains seemed to hold ancient secrets. It felt like a world apart, a sanctuary held in the loving embrace of the sea, a place where a new story could begin. There, in the deep, quiet solitude of the island, she gave birth to her son. He was not born with a crash of thunder or a great cry that shook the heavens. He came into the world with a gentle, quiet light. His first breath a soft sigh that was carried away by the gentle, salt-scented breeze. She named him Zeus, a name that felt like a new and hopeful sound in a world of ancient, heavy silence. Holding him, she knew she could not keep him. Not yet. Her quiet act of defiance required one last, sorrowful deception. Leaving the infant in the care of the island's ancient spirits, she walked along a dry riverbed until she found what she was looking for. It was the Omphalos stone, a great, smooth rock, ancient and heavy, a piece of the earth's own heart. It was cool to the touch, and it seemed to hum with a deep primordial energy. She lifted it, its weight a solemn reminder of the burden she now carried. With hands that were both gentle and trembling, she wrapped the stone in soft, warm, swaddling clothes. She treated the cold, lifeless rock with all the tenderness of a loving mother. Her sorrow and her hope poured into this single, desperate act. The weight of the stone in her arms now felt like the weight of the child she had to leave behind, the heavy price of his safety. she returned to the golden court of the Titans, her face a mask of serene and sorrowful duty. The air there was thick and still, heavy with the scent of eternal summer and unspoken dread. She approached the great throne where Cronus sat, a figure of immense and tragic power, his gaze lost in the contemplation of the perfect, unending now. She presented the swaddled stone to him. He looked upon it, but he did not truly see it. His fear had become a ritual, a blind and repetitive motion he performed to keep the gears of fate from turning. He saw only what he expected to see. Another child, another spark of the future that must be contained. With a deep and weary sigh, a sound of profound and ancient sadness, he took the heavy bundle and, like all the others, he gathered it into himself. The heavy stone settled deep within him, a false and heavy piece, a lie that would become an anchor, holding him to the past while the true future was allowed, for the first time, to grow. Back on the island of Crete, in the rugged slopes of Mount Ida, the infant Zeus was taken to his new home. It was not a palace of gold and light, but a deep and secret place, the 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭 cave. Let your mind travel there now, to the mouth of this sacred place. The entrance is shrouded in green ivy and the cool shade of ancient trees. Inside, it is not a place of darkness, but of a soft, living twilight. The walls of the cave do not feel like dead stone. They feel alive, and they glitter with a faint silvery light from veins of crystal. The air is cool and smells of damp, rich earth, of sweet nectar, and of wild, growing things. The only sound is the soft, rhythmic dripping of water from the tips of stalactites, each drop falling into a clear, still pool below, a sound like a slow and patient clock marking a new kind of time, a time of secret, steady growth. This cave was a cradle, a sanctuary, a womb within the loving body of the earth itself. And here, the hidden hope of the world was safe. The young god was not alone in his protected solitude. The ancient spirits of the island became his family. His nurse was the gentle nymph Amalthea, who nurtured him with a love that was as wild and as pure as the mountain itself. She fed him not with ordinary milk, but with a substance that carried the very essence of the untamed world. With every drop, Zeus drank in the resilience of the ancient stone, the freedom of the winds that swept the high peaks, the deep wisdom of the forest, and the boundless strength of the earth. He was being nourished by the life force that his father had tried so desperately to control. He was also tended by the Melissae, the sacred bee nymphs of the mountain. They moved through the cave like small golden spirits, their wings a near silent hum. They brought him honey, a golden nectar gathered from the island's secret flowers, a food so pure and so potent that it built not just the body of a god, but the very light of his immortal soul. And to protect this sacred infancy, to guard this whispering hope, there were the 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭. They were the warrior spirits of the mountain, but their duty here was not one of war. At the mouth of the cave, they performed a constant, rhythmic dance. They moved with a slow and steady beat, and they would strike their spears against their great bronze shields. But the sound they made was not the sharp, violent clash of battle. It was a deep, resonant, and rhythmic shushing, a percussive lullaby that was both powerful and profoundly gentle. This sound, this steady, rhythmic pulse, became the heartbeat of the hidden god. It blended with the whisper of the wind through the pine trees, with the drone of the sacred bees, and with the distant, soft roar of the waves on the shore far below. Together, these sounds wove a great blanket of noise, a shield of sound that wrapped the entire mountain in a protective embrace, ensuring that no cry from the infant god, no sound of his growing life, could ever travel beyond the shores of Crete. to the throne of his unknowing father. And so, while the great golden world of Cronus remained locked in its perfect, sunlit and fearful stillness, a new age was quietly taking root. Here, in a whispering cave, protected by a rhythmic lullaby and nourished by the pure essence of the free earth, a heart was beating where there should have been silence. A light was growing in the darkness. A future was stirring in the secret, deep and fertile soil of a mother's unending hope. Within the secret, living heart of the Dictaean cave, time was a different thing entirely. Outside, in the kingdom of Cronus, time was a great, stagnant, golden sea. But here, time was a river, flowing with a quiet and purposeful current. It was measured not by the rising and setting of a sun he could not see, but by the steady rhythm of his own growth, by the slow, sure strengthening of his limbs, and by the deepening of the world's wisdom within his soul. The infant god, the hidden hope named Zeus, began the long, quiet journey into his own power. He grew as the young trees on the mountain grew, reaching ever upward, his nature forged by the wild, free essence of his sanctuary. He learned the language of the dripping water, a lesson in patience. He learned the secrets of the stone, a lesson in endurance. From the mouth of his cave, he watched the great wheel of the stars turn in the night sky, and he learned the patterns of the cosmos, a lesson in destiny. The whispers of the wind that caressed the mountain slopes brought him stories from the world beyond, tales of a vast and beautiful kingdom that was held in a state of profound and sorrowful sleep. He felt its beauty, but he also felt its deep and fundamental imbalance. A world without growth, he came to understand, was a world without life, and a king who feared the future was a king who had forsaken his most sacred duty. A quiet resolve settled into his being, as solid and as unshakable as the mountain that had cradled him. It was not a feeling of anger or of vengeance, but a deep and certain knowledge that the stillness had to be broken, that the past had to be set free, and that the world had to be allowed to breathe again. When he had reached the fullness of his divine strength, a figure of quiet and powerful grace, he knew his time in the sanctuary was over. He stepped out from the cool twilight of the cave into the full, warm light of the world, and began his silent journey. He moved not like a storm, but like a steady, flowing river, his purpose clear and calm. The world he travelled through was just as the whispers had described it, a place of breathtaking but static beauty. The air was warm and heavy, the forests were silent and deep, but it all felt like a painting, a memory of life rather than life itself. He could feel the vibrant, living pulse of the world that he had known on Crete. The very pulse of his mother Gaia was here suppressed, held in, checked by a great and weary will. On his journey, he was met by a quiet and watchful presence. She was Métis, a titaness of the old world, but one whose spirit was not bound to the stagnant past. Her name meant wisdom, and she moved with a grace that was both ancient and full of foresight. She saw in the young god not a destroyer, but a liberator, the answer to the world's unspoken prayer. She did not give him a sword or a call to battle. Instead, she shared her knowledge with him, her voice a soft and steady whisper, like leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. She told him of a way to undo the past, not through violence, but through memory. She gave him the recipe for a special potion, an elixir that would not harm the old king, but would compel him to release the life he had held captive for so long. She advised him to hide his power, to cloak his brilliant light in humility, and to enter the court of his father, not as a challenger, but as a servant. And so Zeus, the rightful heir to the cosmos, cloaked himself in the guise of a humble cupbearer. He approached the golden court of the Titans, a place of immense and heavy silence. The very air seemed thick with unspoken history, and the light that filled its great halls was the color of preserved amber. The Titans who dwelled there moved with a slow and dreamlike grace, their ancient faces beautiful but empty, their eyes holding the reflection of a single, unending day. Here, in the very heart of his father's power, Zeus became an invisible presence. He moved with a quiet deference, his head bowed, his steps silent on the polished floors. His duty was simple: to pour the sweet, golden nectar for the king and his court. From his humble position, he watched his father, Cronus. He saw the great king of the Titans, a being of unimaginable power, yet he saw a figure trapped in his own eternal prison. He saw the deep weariness in his father's eyes, the profound and constant sorrow of a monarch who was forced to perform the same sad ritual over and over again to keep his world from ending. In his heart, the young Zeus felt not a burning hatred, but a deep and complex pity. He understood that his father's actions had come not from malice, but from a love that had become so fearful it could not bear the thought of change. And so he waited, performing his duties with a flawless and patient grace. His presence, a quiet, unnoticed ripple in the vast, still pond of the Golden Age. He was a secret, a promise, a future that was hiding in plain sight. The moment, chosen by the careful wisdom of Metis, finally arrived. She provided Zeus with the elixir, a draught that looked no different from the usual nectar, but which carried within it the unstoppable power of what should have been. With a steady hand and a calm heart, Zeus filled his father's great golden cup. He approached the throne, his movements as fluid and as graceful as always. He presented the cup to the king. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met. In Zeus's gaze, there was only the quiet respect of a servant. In Cronus's gaze, there was only the ancient, weary distraction of a king, lost in his own timeless thoughts. Cronus took the cup and drank, his great thirst for the sweet nectar of his unchanging world as deep as ever. For a moment, nothing happened. The golden light remained the same. The heavy silence continued. But then, a great shudder ran through the mighty king, a tremor that was felt not just in the hall, but through the very fabric of time itself. It was as if a great frozen river was finally beginning to thaw. A deep and sorrowful groan escaped the king's lips, a sound of immense and cosmic pressure being released. This was not an act of violence, but a great unburdening, a sigh of relief from a world that had been holding its breath for an age. First, with a heavy and final sound that echoed in the silent hall, the Omphalos stone emerged, the lie at the heart of the kingdom now brought into the light. The great smooth rock, which had rested in the king's belly as a false piece, now landed on the floor, a solid and undeniable truth. Later, it would be set in the earth at Delphi, a new center for a world that was about to be reborn. Then, the true miracle began, the unraveling of the past. From the depths of the Titan king, a figure emerged, not as a helpless infant, but as a fully formed and powerful god. It was Poseidon, and as he stood, a great tide of energy flowed into the hall. The air grew thick with the scent of salt and the deep, open sea, a wild and liberating scent that the court had not known for an eternity. He was followed by another, a quiet and dignified shadow that seemed to absorb the light around him. It was Hades, and his presence brought the rich, cool silence of the deep earth, the mystery of the unseen, and the wealth that lay hidden in the dark. Then came the goddesses, unfurling like magnificent long-slumbering flowers. Hera appeared first, majestic and proud, her eyes holding the deep, complex patterns of a gathering storm, her very being radiating an aura of sovereignty and a promise of a new and lasting order. She was followed by the gentle Demeter, who brought with her the warmth of a true harvest, the scent of living grain and fertile soil, a warmth that was not stagnant, but alive with the cycle of birth, growth, and rest. And last, the quietest and perhaps most profound of all, was Hestia. She did not arrive with a show of power, but simply was. With her presence, a gentle, steady warmth filled the great hall, the sacred, constant flame of the hearth, a symbol of home and a center for the new family of gods, finally lit and burning brightly. They stood together for the first time, the 6 children of Cronus, whole and free. There were no shouts of triumph, no cries for vengeance. There was only a quiet, awe-filled moment of recognition. They looked at each other, and in their siblings' eyes, they saw the missing parts of their world, the lost notes in a cosmic symphony that could now, at last, be played. Cronus, the great king, slumped on his throne, not dead, but deeply weakened. The past he had tried to contain, now standing before him, powerful and real. The heavy stillness of the Golden Age was shattered forever. The air in the great hall was now alive, charged with the thrilling, terrifying, and beautiful potential of a world reborn. The long, stagnant afternoon was over, and on the horizon, the first faint and hopeful colors of a new dawn were beginning to appear. The great golden hall of the Titans, which had for an age been a place of profound and heavy stillness, was now filled with a new and unsettling energy. The 6 liberated gods, the first Olympians, stood together, their very presence a quiet and undeniable challenge to the old and unchanging order. The initial shock of their arrival gave way to a deep and silent division, a cosmic parting of ways that was as inevitable as the turning of a tide. The Titans, the ancient and powerful guardians of the static past, looked upon these vibrant new beings not with understanding, but with a deep and sorrowful confusion. This sudden, impossible change was a violation of the one law that had governed their entire existence, that the perfect golden moment should last forever. Their sorrow hardened into a powerful and instinctual resistance, a deep and unshakable will to press the world back into the familiar silent shape it had always known. The young Olympians felt this immense, unyielding pressure. They knew, without a word being spoken, that they could not remain. This hall, this entire world, was a memory that no longer had a place for them. Their departure was a quiet and solemn procession. They did not flee as vanquished foes, nor march as triumphant conquerors. They simply turned and walked away from the golden light of the past, their steps leading them toward a future they would have to create for themselves. They journeyed to the highest and most majestic peak in all the world, a mountain whose summit pierced the very heavens, a place of sharp, clean stone and thin, clear air. This was Olympus, and it became their home and their fortress, a bastion of new beginnings. And so, the 2 great powers of the world settled on their opposing thrones. On the ancient and storied slopes of Mount Othrys, the Titans gathered. Their mountain was a place of immense foundational power, rooted deep in the memory of the earth. The air around it was warm and thick, heavy with the golden light of the eternal afternoon they sought to preserve. Mount Othrys was a fortress of what had been, a symbol of stability, permanence, and the immense unmoving weight of the past. Across a vast and silent valley, the new gods made their home on the pristine peak of Mount Olympus. Their mountain was a symbol of what was to come. Its slopes were steep and aspirational, reaching out of the heavy air of the world below into the clear, cold potential of the sky. The light on Olympus was not the heavy gold of memory, but a bright, silvery white radiance, the light of a new and unwritten dawn. Between these two great mountains, the world held its breath. The 10-year war that followed was not a war of clashing armies or shouted commands. There were no ringing swords, no cries of battle to shatter the deep and profound silence. It was a war of wills, a long and patient cosmic stalemate, a test of endurance between two opposing realities. Imagine it now as a great and silent pressure. From Mount Othrys, the Titans exerted the immense gravity of their existence. They were the past, and their will was a powerful downward force, seeking to smooth out the new wrinkles in the fabric of time, to calm the new currents of change, and to pull the world back into its comfortable, dreamlike stillness. From the high peak of Mount Olympus, the young gods exerted an opposite force. Theirs was a will to become, a powerful, upward, and expansive energy that sought to stretch the fabric of reality, to allow for new patterns, new stories, and new life. The world itself was caught in this great and silent tug of war. For 10 long years, it existed in a state of beautiful and sorrowful twilight. The sun seemed to lose its certainty, its golden light thinned and diluted. The moon, in its soft and silvery passage, seemed to hesitate in the sky, unsure of which mountain peak its allegiance belonged to. The seasons, which had once been a single, unending summer, now became a confused and gentle blurring, a world of soft springs that never fully bloomed and mellow autumns that never led to the rest of winter. The very rhythm of creation had been paused. The rivers slowed, their currents uncertain. The great placid oceans felt the conflicting pulls, their tides becoming erratic and shallow, a confused and gentle lapping against shores that waited for a new and steady pulse to guide them. This was the 10-year twilight, and the war was felt not in the ears, but in the very bones of the earth. It was a low, constant hum, a vibration so deep that it was more a feeling than a sound. It was the sound of two immense and opposing tones being held in a perfect, unwavering state of tension. In the air, there was a constant, invisible flickering, like the heat haze on a distant summer horizon, the visible sign of the immense energies being expended in perfect, silent balance. The mountains that stood in the great valley between Olympus and Othrys seemed to groan under the strain, their ancient stones subjected to a constant and opposing pressure that was slowly and patiently grinding them down. Time itself grew weary. The 10 long years passed like a single, drawn-out and heavy breath. For the Titans on their ancient mountain, the struggle began to change them. The golden light they radiated, once a symbol of their effortless power, now seemed to be a heavy cloak they had to consciously hold up. The constant effort of holding back the future began to exhaust them. Their certainty, which had been as solid as the foundations of the world, began to develop fine hairline cracks of doubt. Their age of perfect stillness was no longer a peaceful dream, but a waking effort, and it was a task that was slowly draining them of their ancient, boundless energy. For the young gods on their high and lonely peak, the long years were a different kind of test. The constant, crushing pressure of the past was immense. It took all of their vibrant, new energy simply to exist, to hold their ground against the overwhelming desire of the world to fall back into its old and familiar sleep. Their bright hope was tested against the deep and wearying pessimism of the old order. Their will to create was pitted against an inertia as old as the world itself. It was a decade of profound and patient waiting, a test that would either forge them into true and worthy rulers of a new age, or would see their brilliant, nascent light slowly and surely extinguished by the heavy blanket of the past. The entire cosmos seemed to be a quiet and patient observer of this great struggle. The ancient forests watched with a deep and silent neutrality, their leaves rustling with a sound that could be a sigh for the passing of the old, or a whisper of welcome for the new. The great deep ocean, the soul of which was Poseidon, felt the stalemate as a deep and personal conflict, a battle between the calm, still depths and the potential of a new and dynamic surface. The world was waiting. It was trapped in a beautiful, sorrowful, and unbreakable deadlock. The old age was too powerful to be simply forgotten, and the new age was too full of life to be denied. A change had to come. A new element had to be introduced to break the perfect, wearying balance. And so, the world remained in its long twilight, holding its breath, waiting for one of its kings to find a new key, one that could finally unlock the coming dawn. On the high, silver-lit peak of Mount Olympus, the long twilight of the stalemate wore on. The 10 years had felt like an eternity, a single sustained note of immense and wearying tension. Zeus, the young king of the new gods, stood and watched the unchanging horizon. He felt the immense, heavy pressure of the past pushing against him, and he felt the unyielding hope of his siblings around him. Yet he knew that hope and will alone were not enough to break this perfect, unbreakable deadlock. The world was trapped, and a new kind of power was needed to set it free. In this moment of profound quiet, he turned his thoughts not to the heavens above, but to the deep and ancient earth beneath him. He sought the counsel not of the distant stars, but of the foundational wisdom of the world itself. He sent his consciousness downward, past the roots of his mountain home, through the silent layers of ancient stone, and into the deep, knowing heart of Gaia, his grandmother. He did not speak a question, but simply listened. And from the profound stillness, a memory, a feeling arose within him. It was Gaia's voice, not of spoken words, but of a deep, resonant truth that hummed in the very rock he stood upon. She reminded him that there were other children of the earth, older and more elemental powers, born in the world's first dawn. They had been imprisoned long ago, cast down into the deepest and most forgotten part of creation, the silent abyss of Tartarus. They were his uncles, the 3 Cyclopes, the celestial smiths who could shape the very fabric of reality, and the 3 𝐬𝐿, the 100-handed ones, whose strength was that of the earth itself. They were not monsters, the whisper of Gaia seemed to say, but keys. They were the forgotten power that could unlock the future. Guided by this ancient and silent wisdom, Zeus began a journey that no other had ever taken. It was a quiet and solitary descent into the great unknown. He traveled down, leaving the thin, clear air of Olympus behind, and entered the deep, secret pathways within the earth. He moved through vast caverns where crystals glowed with a soft internal light, and past underground rivers that flowed in utter silence. The further he went, the more the world's noise faded, until all that was left was a profound and absolute stillness. He was traveling not through a place of fire or torment, but into the very foundation of existence, a realm of immense, sleeping pressure and deep, creative darkness. This was Tartarus, the great silent anchor of the world. There, in the dreamless, starless dark, he found them. They were immense, sleeping forms, their outlines barely visible against the deep gloom. They were the Cyclopes and the 𝐬𝐿, bound not by chains of metal, but by heavy, woven bonds of shadow and forgotten time. Their long imprisonment had not been a punishment of pain, but a deep and profound sleep, a long forgetting. Zeus approached them not with the arrogance of a king, but with the quiet respect of a kinsman. He did not raise his voice to break the sacred silence of the place. Instead, he reached out with his own vibrant, living energy and spoke to the dormant spirits within them. He offered not a command, but a gentle invitation. He spoke of the world above, of the long twilight, of the sky and the sea and the wind. He offered them a chance to feel the air on their ancient skin once more, to see the light of a new dawn, and to be a part of the world's great and beautiful becoming. Slowly, like a deep and ancient frost beginning to thaw, the chains of shadow that bound them dissolved into mist. Their awakening was not a sudden, violent eruption, but a slow and majestic unfolding, a stirring as deep and as powerful as mountains shifting or continents waking from a long slumber. A deep, resonant hum began to fill the silence of Tartarus, the sound of immense and ancient power returning to consciousness. They rose, their single great eyes and their 100 powerful arms returning to the world of the living, their hearts filled not with rage for their long confinement, but with a deep and profound gratitude for their liberation. In this gratitude, they offered Zeus and his brothers the gift of their ancient and powerful craft. They led them to the very heart of the earth, to a great natural forge lit not by a destructive burning flame, but by the pure, white-hot, creative energy that pulsed at the center of the world. Here, the great work began. The rhythmic, echoing fall of the Cyclops' hammers became a new heartbeat for the cosmos. For Zeus, they began to forge a symbol of his new authority. They gathered strands of the purest, most distant starlight, the silent flash of lightning from a summer cloud, and the clear, sharp sound of the sky itself. With rhythmic and patient blows, they hammered and folded these ethereal concepts into a solid form. The result was not a jagged weapon of destruction, but a beautiful, gleaming scepter of condensed and living light. It was the thunderbolt, and it hummed in Zeus's hand with the power of celestial order, a tool to bring clarity and law to the new age. For Poseidon, whose soul was the deep and untamed sea, they forged a different kind of power. They took the deep, rhythmic, and unending pulse of the ocean's heart, the silent, deep green light that filters down into the abyss, and the immense, crushing pressure of the deepest trenches. From these, they forged the magnificent, three-pronged trident. It was not a weapon for war, but a key to the great mysteries of the water, a tool to calm the storms and to speak to the ancient life that slumbered in the deep. And for Hades, the quiet and solemn brother, they crafted a gift of stillness and shadow. They took a piece of the profound, secret-keeping darkness from the time before creation and spun it into a cap of deepest night. It was the helm of darkness, a cloak that did not inspire fear, but granted the wearer the gift of quiet, unseen passage, the ability to walk the hidden pathways of the world, seen only by those he wished to see. The three brothers now stood, holding these new emblems of their destiny. The long, wearying stalemate of the 10-year twilight was about to end. These were not just gifts of power. They were the very tools with which a new world would be governed, its balance restored, and its future built. A new and decisive force had now quietly entered the world, forged in gratitude and darkness, and the long-awaited dawn was, at last, ready to be broken. The quiet, solitary journey back from the world's foundation was a slow and majestic ascent. Zeus, his brothers, and their newly freed allies moved upward through the deep, silent layers of the earth, leaving the profound and dreamless stillness of Tartarus behind. They rose like a deep and certain tide, and when they finally emerged back into the world, it was as if they were breaching the surface of a great, still ocean. The air of the 10-year twilight felt thin and weary compared to the dense ancient power of the world below. Their return to the silver-lit peak of Mount Olympus was a silent and momentous occasion. The other Olympians, who had kept their long and patient vigil, felt the shift before they even saw it. A new and profound certainty settled over the mountain, a sense of purpose as solid and as real as the gleaming new emblems of power the three brothers now held. The time of waiting was over. From their high peak, the Olympians looked across the valley to the ancient and heavy slopes of Mount Othrys, where the Titans stood, eternal guardians of a fading age. The final confrontation was not to be a clash of rage and fury, but a great and final symphony, a cosmic rebalancing to bring the world into a new and lasting harmony. Zeus was the first to act. He stepped forward to the edge of the Olympian cliffs and raised the thunderbolt. He did not cast it like a spear, nor wield it like a club. He simply held it aloft, and from its core, a stream of pure, undiluted, and clarifying light poured forth. It was the light of a new and undeniable truth. It did not burn or destroy. It illuminated. It cut through the heavy golden haze of the twilight, dissolving the shadows of the past and dispelling the weariness of the long stalemate. It was the light of order, of reason, of a future that was no longer a threat, but a promise. The Titans on their mountain were not struck by this light, but they were silenced by it. It was a brilliance their ancient eyes, so accustomed to the soft, unchanging glow of their own age, could not comprehend. Their resistance, born of a fear of the unknown, began to dissolve in the face of this beautiful and absolute clarity. Then Poseidon, feeling the world's new rhythm, stepped forward and struck the base of their mountain with his great trident. The impact was not a violent, shattering blow. It was a deep and resonant chord, a single perfect note that travelled through the very bones of the earth. The mountains, which had for a decade groaned under the silent tension, now settled with a great and peaceful sigh into a new and more stable alignment. The deep underground rivers found their true courses, and the oceans of the world responded to this new song. Their confused and erratic tides calmed, and for the first time they began to move with a deep, steady, and rhythmic pulse, the true and lasting heartbeat of the sea. And as the world found its new rhythm, the great hekatonchires, the 100-handed ones, began their slow and mighty work. Their great strength was not used for destruction, but for creation. They were not soldiers, but architects of the new age. With their 100 powerful arms, they became a force of nature. They reached down and took hold of the very foundations of the landscape. They lifted immense boulders and entire mountainsides, not with a roar of effort, but with the deep, quiet strength of the earth itself. They did not hurl these great masses at their foes. Instead, they moved them with a calm and deliberate purpose, reshaping the valley, creating new plains and raising new hills, ending the long and wearying stalemate, not by overpowering their enemies, but by transforming the very ground upon which the conflict had been waged. Their work was a great and powerful geological ballet, a final and decisive act of world building. The Titans on Mount Othrys watched this symphony of power, and they felt their age coming to its inevitable, gentle close. The new reality that was unfolding was not one they could fight, for it was a change in the very nature of existence. Their immense will, which had held the world in a state of perfect stillness for so long, finally began to relax its grip. Their heavy, golden light, the very essence of their being, began to fade. It was not extinguished, but rather it softened and receded, like a long, slow, and magnificent sunset, its colours giving way to the cool, clear shades of the coming night, which would in turn give way to a new dawn. One by one, they lowered their gazes, their resistance giving way to a profound and weary acceptance. For their great leader, Atlas, whose strength had been the pillar of their long resistance, Zeus reserved a new and solemn purpose. His was not to be a punishment, but a sacred, eternal duty. He was led to the western edge of the world, and there he was asked to take the great dome of the sky, Uranus, upon his broad shoulders. He was to hold it aloft, forever separating the heavens from the earth, creating a safe and protected space between them, a space where the new world of mortals and gods could breathe and grow, without being crushed by the immense and heavy weight of the cosmos. It was a noble, quiet, and profoundly important task, and Atlas accepted it with a silent dignity, becoming a timeless and steadfast pillar of the new creation. The other Titans were then gently guided on a final procession. They were not driven as captives, but escorted with a quiet and solemn respect. Their great and primal power was too immense, too chaotic to have a place in the delicate balance of the new world, and so they were led back down into the deep, quiet darkness from which their ancient cousins had been freed. Their return to Tartarus was a great laying to rest. Poseidon himself raised great, gleaming walls of bronze at its gates, not to create a cruel prison, but to fashion a quiet and inviolable sanctuary. Here, the immense and elemental power of the old age could sleep, undisturbed and at peace, becoming the silent, stable foundation upon which the new world could safely rest. And when the last of the old light had faded, and the last of the old power had been laid to rest, a profound and holy stillness fell upon the world. The long 10-year twilight was finally over. Then, on the eastern horizon, a soft, pale light began to grow. It was the first true dawn of the age of the Olympians. It washed over the world, its light clean and new, making the leaves of the ancient forest shimmer and turning the calm and rhythmic sea to a sheet of silver and rose. On the peak of Mount Olympus, the new gods stood and watched this new day begin. The world below them was quiet, peaceful, and vibrant with a potential it had never known. With a sense of calm and shared purpose, they peacefully accepted their domains, not as conquerors dividing spoils, but as caretakers assuming their sacred responsibilities. To Hades, the solemn and wise brother, went the unseen world below, the silent and rich domain of all that lies beneath the surface. To Poseidon, the mighty and deep-hearted brother, went the great living seas, with all their mysteries and all their rhythms. And to Zeus, the liberator and the king, went the vast clear expanse of the sky, from which he would watch over the balance of all things. The great cycle was complete. The world took its first long, easy breath. All was quiet. All was in harmony. All was at peace. Good night, dream well.